Hey tea heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. In this video we're going to be doing a session with Moonlight White. This video is going to go under the single tea tastings playlist. If at any time you enjoy this video, then please give it the thumbs up. The more thumbs in the air, the more tea videos are going to come your way. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, then go click that button. Okay, so Moonlight White in Chinese is Yue Guang Bai. Yue Guang Bai is pretty much a direct translation of Moonlight White. This comes from Yunnan province, southwest China, which is pretty much considered to be the birthplace of tea. We picked this tea up on one of our pu'erh finding treks in Yunnan province, beginning of this year. And we were drinking tea with one of the farmers, the Yi tribe farmers, and we fell in love with this tea that they had, Moonlight White. It's a really interesting tea. The reason why it's interesting is because in many ways it defies classification. It looks like a white tea. We file it under white tea. However, you could also argue that it's a black tea. You could also argue that it's a pu'erh tea. Some may argue that it's similar to an oolong tea. So in many ways, it's impossible to lock down in any one category of tea, which is kind of interesting. The history of this tea, there's a bit of controversy about it, but it seems that it's a relatively new tea. Maybe in the last couple of decades, some people talk about a Taiwanese farmer who went and invented this processing technique for this tea. Some of the tribal farmers say that this has been a type of tea that they've made for many centuries. I tend to believe that it's a relatively new form of tea because it's not really on the market very much and I haven't seen it before. So it's a relatively unusual tea. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to S.C.O.P.E this tea. First of all, S.C.O.P.E is what we like to use as an acronym that we like to use at Mayleaf to help people to figure out what the questions are that they need to ask their tea supplier about the tea to understand a little bit more. So S.C.O.P.E stands for season, cultivar, origin, picking and processing, and elevation. So let's S.C.O.P.E the tea. So Moonlight White, season, it's a spring tea. This is an early spring tea. March, April 2013. It's a couple of years old and this tea is suitable for aging. So you could age it, although you would probably want it pressed in a cake form to age it for longer than a few years, 3, 4, 5 years. So this is a couple of years old, which actually helps it, I think. It gives it something extra. As I said, March, April 2013. Cultivar. This is really intriguing, actually. My first thought was that it comes from the Assamica. So the Dayezhong, the cultivar which is used predominantly in making pu'erh tea. However, having dug a little bit deeper in this tea, it's possible and quite probable that this comes from a tea varietal which is outside Camellia sinensis, which is pretty much unheard of outside of Yunnan province, because 99.9% of tea is made from Camellia sinensis. It looks like this comes from a varietal called Camellia taliensis. Camellia taliensis. Although I'm not quite sure about that. And if anybody does know, then please leave comments in the comments section. But I believe it comes from Camellia taliensis, which is a relatively widely unused tea varietal and a wild tea varietal in Yunnan's forests. Okay, so the age of the tea tree is also important. This is a middle arbor, 150-year-old tea tree. So it's not as old as your 500, 800, 1,000-year-old pu'erh teas from the same province, but it certainly isn't a garden tea either. So 150 years is still quite an old tea tree, which means the roots have had time to thicken up and grow long, and they're pulling up all of the nutrients and minerals from the beautiful Yunnan soil to make a very rich, complex, flavoured tea with a lot of effect. Okay, so we've done S, we've done C. Next is O, which is origin. Origin, this comes from Yunnan. This comes from Jingu area of Yunnan, which is quite close to the actual city or town of Pu'erh. A very beautiful area, very wild. This comes from relatively wild tea forests. So the tea land was relatively abandoned and returned to over the last couple of decades. They have started cultivating it. It tends to be that if you drink purely wild tea from tea trees that are wild, you're not going to get necessarily the best tea. So it's slightly cultivated, but middle arbor, 150-year-old tea trees, relatively wild. Okay, P is for picking and processing, and this is when it starts to get interesting. So the pick on this is one bud and one leaf with quite a lot of stem. And we'll go and zoom in close up to these leaves in a little bit. So one bud, one leaf, and quite a lot of stem. You can see they're relatively large buds here. And the processing, this is where it starts to get a little bit flowery and quite interesting. So this is called Moonlight White because this tea in its processing never sees the sun. It's picked on a full moon. And then it's processed or withered in darkness. Now, either that's done outside under the moon. My suspicion is that you wouldn't get a long enough wither if you pick and wither under the moon. So I think that what they do is that they lay this out in a single layer in the darkness to allow it to wither and dry. The reason for the full moon, well, you know, the members of the tribe and the farmers were telling me that it gives the tea unique properties, and especially this wonderful dark coloured, which again, I'll zoom in later so you can see this beautiful black coloured leaf, which is meant to represent the other side of the moon, with the white buds. I'm not sure if this is true. Clearly, biodynamic farming has been used for a long period of time, and we know that biodynamic farming works in many ways. So I wouldn't be surprised if the fact that it's a full moon has an effect. Or it may be simply that if you're picking under moonlight because you don't want this tea to ever see sunlight, then it would make sense to pick under the brightest moonlight that you can. And so the full moon does make quite a lot of sense. So they pick the bud and the one leaf. They then lay it out either outside or inside, but in darkness, and they allow it to wither and dry. And because it goes through a very long period of withering and drying, the leaf starts to oxidize. And this is why it starts to become a little bit difficult to classify. So white teas usually are picked and withered in the sun and dried. And so it withers and dries relatively quickly. And so as the moisture content disappears from the leaf, the oxidation process stops or slows down to extremely slow speed. With this tea, because it's being withered overnight and in the darkness, obviously the moisture evaporation is much slower. So the withering process is much, much slower, and it allows the tea to oxidize extremely heavily, which is why some people say, well, this is more like a black tea because it's very heavily oxidized tea. Some people say because it's semi-oxidized, you could throw it in the Oolong category. I think that those are in the minority. And many people consider this a pu'erh tea because it comes from that particular area of the world, and it's picked from wild, old tea trees. And because it's gone through a very long withering process and hasn't gone through a heating process, so that means it's going to continue to age and continue to oxidize. Some people put it under the pu'erh category. I think that, in my opinion, it's more like a white or a black tea. But as I said, it's all open for argument, and the tea world is very well versed at having these kinds of discussions. Okay, so we've gone through the scope One, we haven't forgotten, we've got the E. The E is for elevation. This is around 1,200 to 1,500 or 1,600 meters, these tea forests. So this is pretty high up, so it's a good high elevation. The higher the elevation means that you need to, means that the tea tree has a warmer day and a colder night, so a larger temperature difference, which means that the leaf grows slower, and the slower the leaf grows, the more nutrients and more minerals the leaf can start to build up. So that's the elevation. So we've scoped this tea. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the camera and we're going to zoom in and take a look at these leaves. Okay, so let's take a little look at these leaves. Let's see if I can zoom in or focus on here. That's looking about right. So you can see this is quite fluffy tea, so you're not going to get a huge amount of weight per volume, but really, really beautiful, full length buds and these amazing black secondary leaves. You see the beautiful black and white color on this it's something beautiful, and you can see that quite a long stem as well. And so this all adds to the complexity and the flavor. If I try and take one out for you, let me see if I can zoom in on this. Hold on. Okay, there we go. So you can see the bud and the black leaf. You see the bud and the really black leaf. And this is what the tribal members say is the effect that you get when you pick under the full moon. You get this beautiful black leaf compared with the white bud. So this is about 4 grams of tea. We're going to put this in the Guy 1 and give it a little sniff. So this is a warm Guy 1. Ah, beautiful. So you're getting these incredible notes of hay, but with a kind of unripe fruit notes as well. So this kind of slightly beautifully sour unripe fruit, hay, and it's always difficult when you're smelling dry leaf, and I don't advise using dry leaf aroma as your marker for any kind of quality, but you're definitely picking up a lot of complexity, blackcurrant flavors, hay, etc. All right, so now we're going to brew this up and give it a taste. Okay, we're ready to taste. So the link to purchase this tea will be somewhere around here. If you've already bought this tea from us, then why don't you hit pause, put the kettle on, and we can session this tea together. So I've given it a quick rinse, and immediately the leaf is starting to give up completely different aromas. So you've still got the slight hint of hay and grass, but really now we're overtaken with a kind of maltiness and sweetness. Still got some of that sour, unripe fruit, but it's starting to smell a little bit more kind of stewed fruit, like a kind of a blackcurrant jam. Beautiful, sweet, sour, malty, creamy notes. It's quite intense in terms of complexity. Okay, so it's about 4 grams of tea in a Guy 1, which is, I would say it's probably about 150 mil large. You can probably do 8-9 infusions with this tea, and I'm using 90-95 degree water. You could use hot, you could use boiling. You're going to pick up a little bit more bitterness, but if you want that extra strength and that little bite of bitterness, then go right ahead. I wouldn't go much lower than 90 for this tea, because you're gonna lose out on a lot of the complexity of flavors. Okay, so let's give it a brew and let's taste this. I'm excited to taste this tea. So we're just going to give it little flash infusions, not too long. Just want to start to have a bit of a time-lapse tasting here. So see how it tastes as the water starts to move in the leaf. Give it a quick smell. Oh yeah, wow. Okay, so this intense creaminess and maltiness. So you're kind of getting the malt from a black tea and the slight kind of fruitiness of a black tea, but you're getting the kind of pepperiness and creaminess of a white tea. Really, really interesting. Let's give it a taste. So the color of the liquor is kind of like a dull gold. So again, just like a white tea that tends to have a hint of kind of subdued dullness to it. You've got that, but then you've got this lovely gold color. Okay, so syrupy and supple on the tongue. So really lovely, quite thick, considering it's relatively light. You get malt, you get the sweetness of a soft black tea, but it's starting to reveal kind of lighter notes like melon, like a cantaloupe or something like that, that kind of orange cantaloupe. That kind of sweetness, a nice kind of fresh sweetness running through it too. Let's give it another taste. Yeah, malty, creamy, sweet, fruit. I'm not getting much floweriness. But from my experience, I think that will start to reveal itself in later infusions. The beautiful thing about this tea, actually, is because it is made up of buds, they take longer to infuse. So if you flash infuse these leaves, it'll give up flavor in quite detailed stages, and so you're going to notice differences between each infusion here much more than you would with a lot of other teas. Okay, so I'm going to pour some of this away, and we're going to leave that for another couple of seconds while I keep drinking. Yeah, beautiful. There is the slight kind of dry hay note running through it, but overall you get this creamy maltiness. Okay, let's see what the next infusion has for us. So the color of this infusion is, as you'd expect, darker. So the leaf and the buds are starting to really absorb the water, and the solution, the tea solution, is starting to release itself. So you're getting a darker tea, and it is shifting, definitely shifting. Okay, so the maltiness is starting to disappear a little bit. You've got the cream, the fruit, the melons, etc., starting to pick up a hint of floweriness. So I'm going to keep drinking this tea. We're going to stop the camera, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the different infusions and take a look at these wet leaves. Okay, let's take a look at these wet tea leaves so you can see how they've been transformed by the water. So you can see those black leaves have kind of become a more of a brown color, and also what you can notice is that these buds that were once white, they're starting to reveal just how oxidized they actually are. So if you actually look inside these buds, you can see, let me just try and put that down here, try and flatten it out for you. You can see the dark area inside here. And I bet even if let's take a look inside these little buds, which are very white on the outside. Yep, you can see again, you've got quite a lot of darkness, quite oxidized inside. I hope you can see that. So you can see how dark the inside is. And so that really reveals just how long these leaves and buds were left to wither and dry, and how long it took for the oxidation process to stop. And this is why you're getting this very reminiscent of black tea flavor profile in this tea, because in fact it has oxidized very heavily all the way through the buds. So the white buds that have this beautiful downy hair on the outside that make them shiny and white, when you actually open them up, you can see that they really have gone through quite a lot of oxidation. Okay, so we're 8 infusions in on this tea, and it's just starting to really lose its strength. So I think about 10 infusions maximum on this. You don't want to drink tea all the way to water. You want to make sure that you leave on a high. It keeps you coming back for more. This tea has incredible complexity. The way that it moves from infusion 1 to infusion 8 is quite alluring. The way that it moves from a sort of kind of malty creaminess to a sweetness and a fruitiness like kind of melons and cantaloupe particularly I keep getting, and a slight honey notes as well. And then surprisingly it starts to shift into darker like red fruit, blackcurrant, woody stewed fruit notes, which is more reminiscent of stronger Yunnan black tea. And then just at the tail end, around infusions 6 or 7, you start, as the complexity of the darker fruits start to move away, you start to get this beautiful floral flavor and aroma. The leaf starts to reveal very fresh, very breezy kind of meadow flowers, maybe some honeysuckle in there. Just subtle, nothing too heavy, but it's a lovely tail end to the tea. So this tea takes you on quite a journey, and it's a remarkable tea. Also, I noticed that you're starting to get some sort of tingling sensation and fizziness on the tongue. Now that's normally associated with older tea trees, especially from Yunnan, so the old pu'erhs from 500, 800, 1,000, 1,500-year-old tea trees. They have such intense mineral content that you start to get this kind of fizzy, tingling feeling on your tongue. It's not that strong on this, but it is definitely there. So you can definitely pick up that this comes not from a garden tea tree, but comes from an older tea tree. As I said, 150-year-old tea trees. And also, with that tingling, you get this beautiful build-up of sweetness around the edges of your tongue. And again, that's really associated with pu'erh teas, this beautiful lingering sweetness. So I know in a couple of hours' time, long after I've finished this tea, I will still have this remnants of sweetness in my mouth. And that's just delicious, a really nice addition to the tea. So I think this tea, Moonlight White, is a really great tea to have in your tea stash. Certainly one to pull out for the tea connoisseurs because of the fact that it doesn't come from Camellia sinensis, but comes from Camellia taliensis, easy for some people to say, and because of the story behind it, the fact that it's withered at night, picked under the full moon, all of that makes it a very interesting, very rare tea, and certainly one that tea aficionados and people that are interested in tea would appreciate. So definitely one to pick up and keep in your tea stash, but certainly one that you can just drink by yourself as well. It takes you on this beautiful journey. It's a lovely, lovely way to spend an hour or so to drink this tea. Okay, that's it, tea heads. If you made it to the end of this video, then please give it the thumbs up and check out our YouTube playlists. If there's any videos that you'd like us to make, then please let us know. And if you're ever in London, come visit us in Camden Town to say hi and taste our wares. If you have any questions or comments, then fire them over. Other than that, I'm Don May from Mayleaf. Thank you for being a part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags, keep drinking the good stuff and spread the word, because remember, nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.